So just some bullets are what we're going to cover today is we're talking about what is Easy Fed Grants in greater detail than what we talked about this morning. Talk about the technologies, some of the benefits, efficiencies, and then look at the internal control objectives that we're aiming towards, which includes process and functionality as well as compliance. And then talk a little bit about security controls. So it just earlier, just a point on introductions. I didn't want to say this earlier during the fireside chat because I am a, bear with me, reformed attorney. So I did my very best to keep my mouth shut, which is really hard for attorneys. But again, I guess that's where the reform part comes in. So, but it's relevant to what we're doing here because my perspective on grants management is there's a whole library of rules that apply. And many people may not think about this, but grants dominate our landscape. 1 out of 10 jobs out there are actually financed directly or indirectly through grants. So whether if you're at the state level, local level, and you're bad-mouthing the federal government, it's actually creating a lot of jobs through those grant activities, maybe through the universities, through hospitals, and through other formats. So grants it's just out there, and a lot of our programs are mandatory grant programs, and some of them are research-based, discretionary grant programs. There's a whole host of them. So with that, in my office, my old office at least, I had a whole wall of not just grant administrative rules, but I also had budget rules. I had finance rules, I had program and project management rules. The rules are just amazing. And my experience and observation is as you go to agencies, there's 2,400 and some grant programs out there. So there's quite a number of them. And everybody does business differently, which is kind of odd because we all have the same set of rules to apply. And so that's really where the Easy Fed Grant solution comes in. And that is a solution that is comprehensive, full life cycle grants management that helps the agencies carry out their duties as well as applicants and recipients as well. And so we have a pre-award process, award, post-award, and closeout. And on the pre-award, think of things like putting out the opportunity, receiving applications, reviewing those applications, ranking, scoring, selecting them, creating obligations as we move into the award phase, creating an award document, all the way to the post-award where you're doing amendments to add, take off money, extend the period of performance, change the scope of work, to claims, and by claims we're talking about different payment methodologies, whether it's an electronic drawdown payment system like Treasury's ASAP, or reimbursing somebody, or giving them a one-off advance. Progress report includes financial performance, property reports, or other reports that may be required by your program areas. And then the closeout, which is one of my personal favorites, is to ensure that that administrative function is finished and that the funds and the accounting are zeroed out, and then the status of the agreement is changed to closed. So how many of you here are from federal agencies in the room? Okay. How many of your organizations have a 100% closeout? That's pretty good. Oh, okay, yeah. The disclaimer is supposed to come first. Disclaimers for first. Okay. So really where we're aiming at is that all of them are closed out. And in fact, when I've done presentations in production in the past, I could never really show the functionality for closeout because they were all closed out. So we've really automated that process. And I think about like financial audit piece. One of the big pieces is unliquidated obligations is another example. Many organizations have a huge challenge with unliquidated obligations. And I'll argue we've so defined what a valid and invalid unliquidated obligation is in our system that we know at any moment in time what the status is for that ULO. So no presidential award yet for that, but we'll hope for the best. I just want to go bowling. Easy Fed Grants technology. So this is actually built on 2 separate platforms that we've integrated. It's SAP's Grantor CRM product, and then also Pega. And the CRM piece is really important. That's kind of I kind of think of the internal organs for our machine as it's connected to our general ledger, which is SAP. For Pega, though, this is the area for the most growth for us. This is where we've pushed out our external portal so that we can have applicants seek non-competitive opportunities, to where we've integrated with grants.gov for competitive opportunities, where we have a robust application review process built into Pega, which allows reviewers to get online. So, and we continue, as I see us moving more and more agencies with diverse programmatic needs. I think this is where most of our build out will come. We have the ability to integrate with Momentum or Oracle products. There's a large federal marketplace out there. Not too many of them are using SAP Financials. And we are, again, interfaced with with Treasury's ASAP and grants.gov. And as of November, I believe the 11th, all of USDA OCFO financial management systems will be in the cloud. So I have my bosses in here. I'm not going to identify him. So if I get this wrong, gosh. Same man that won't give me credit time when I dream this stuff. So, we had they did in the, one of the test environments, they were doing a report that had about 1 billion transactions. I think it took about 2 minutes to do. Historically, I think it took about 12.5 hours to do the equivalent. So the ability to process the information is incredible. And that really ties in with one of the overarching themes of our solution is to have real-time financial information as well as real-time programmatic information. That way we can evaluate throughout the life cycle. Can anyone guess where one of, we've already talked about closeout, we've talked about unliquidated obligations. Anyone want to venture as to what one of the other major challenges are for federal grant programs? I'm sorry? Yeah, you're on the right track. I'll say more generally, monitoring and evaluating. It's one of the great abysses in services, and that's really one of my personal targets for our solution, is we spend less time doing administrative functions and actually more time doing the monitoring and evaluating either the grants or the programs that support those grants. So I like to think this is a very comprehensive solution, but by no means is it finished. And I actually was mentioning to my boss today, I really like these events because it helps to put perspective on how far we've advanced. But it also recognizes that, like others, it's all piecemeal. You know, it's an evolution and growth to get to where we want to be. So fortunately, I think it was Ira was one of our speakers earlier today. I am much older than I look. And, but I unfortunately still have a number of years giving my TSP before I retire. So I think that I have a lifetime of activity associated with this project. But today, walking into the solution, there's a tremendous amount of functionality. I like to think of this as very streamlined. We have 8 agencies out of 17 at USDA using the solution. We have 5 more in queue. And our ultimate objective is to have all 17 grant-making 273 programs in by the end of 2018. So it'll be very large and robust.
How do you introduce that to the other? I also happen to be with USDA. Mm-hmm. How do you introduce that to the non-involved agencies currently?
So it depends on what agency you are with. So what agency are you with?
Farm Service.
I was just kidding. So, no. Yeah. So our approach so far has really been to make agencies aware that the product is out there, and agencies have all voluntarily joined into the service. I'll tell you, one of the greatest pushes within USDA actually happened last year as agencies started to get nervous into fiscal year, didn't know what to do with their money, started to get nervous about how they were going to deal with the Data Act compliance requirements. And that's really helped push a number of those into the queue. So in terms of those agencies that are not in the queue, I think that eventually they're going to just see the wisdom of getting into the solution, whether it's cost savings, uniformity across the agency, and so forth. So part of the streamlining and standardizing has been because we have a governance structure in place, we have a policy committee in place that help us to drive either a universal system architecture or specific functionality to make things happen. So for example, we talked about, I've already mentioned ASAP. We actually have two separate ways in which ASAP is used in our system because it doesn't work the same way for all programs. So now when somebody new comes in, now they have two separate ways that they can configure the use of ASAP for their programs. Reduced unliquidated obligations. In the case of one of the agencies, our first agency, again, they went about from $800 million in unliquidated obligations that they couldn't determine were valid or invalid to those that were within the system, that value is down to zero. Enhanced compliance with legal requirements. Our solution is far more than just a database for grant-related information. It really is the embodiment of enforced compliance. And so we've looked at all the grant rules, such as and including 2 CFR Part 200, Part 170, 175, 180, the list goes on. And we've built many of those requirements into the system. Then we've looked at USDA requirements. Then we've looked at agency-specific requirements down to the program-specific requirements. This is a change, I think, from the way that many organizations have historically created grant programs. I think what a lot of programs have done is they've said, you know, my grant program is extremely unique. None's like this. Has anyone ever heard that if you're in the grant world? I'll tell you, I hear it every single day from everybody that I talk to. Well, that won't work for mine because we're just different. What I like to tell people is if you go look at the Federal Grants and Cooperative Agreements Act of 1977, there is actually only a single definition for a grant. And then they talk about a cooperative agreement, which has a single word that differs from it. So, and it's the word not. So otherwise they're identical in nature. And because of that, what we know is that all grants are grants. But they do have certain functional differences, and they certainly have some programmatic differences. But we argue with our solution is that those are the minority of changes that need to come to the system and don't need to be the majority. In other words, not everything needs to be customized. Let's see, accelerated payments to customers. We have a number of grant programs that do not use electronic drawdown payments. They do it by reimbursements. So in the case of one agency, we've actually gone from 80% of payments taking 2 to 5 months. Anybody in here familiar with the Prompt Payment Act? So you can figure, you do the math yourself. We've actually got it down to where on average those times are about 5 days till the money's sitting in the bank. And if a program person's there to actually approve that payment request, it actually takes about 2 to 3 days. So a significant drop down. And we talked about customer experiences earlier. If you're the public and you have put up $100,000 or $1 million of your own fund to carry out grant activities, boy, you sure don't like to get paid 5 months later or 9 months later in some cases. 3 to 5 days seems to be a nice happy spot for our external customers. So really what we're trying to do is we're trying to say that grants is really a holistic approach for managing grant programs and grant activities and grant awards. This is different than I think a lot of other organizations work. They think of the process as linear, and so they build a system for pre-award. They build another system for award. They build another system for post-award, and maybe different for progress reporting and one for financial reporting. And then maybe if they had time, they did something for closeout. And then they have their grant staffs that deal with just those systems. And maybe somebody that's at mid-level or higher level has a basic understanding of how those are interwoven together. And what we're saying is no, let's put all of the processes, all of the information in a central location so everybody can see the information. It's very transparent. We know it's because it's rule-based, we just know everybody's going to go in the right time. We don't need to have it in linear. It can all be there. Just we use user roles to decide who's going to do what and when. And what this does is this takes everybody off of their own little island, so to speak, where there's poor communication, and puts them on the same island, using the same data, using the same processes, using the same security, using the same, well, really everything, because it's the same agreement record at the end of the day. And what this has done is it's improved service delivery. So again, if you're a university and you want to know what the status is of an application beyond what grants.gov will tell you, they can come to our webpage and they can find that out. If they want to know where their amendment is, if they want to know where a claim request is, all that information is available quite easily. If they just want to get a copy of the award document. Improved operational visibility. Again, this is an awesome tool for our organization because it is extremely transparent internally. So leadership to compliance, including OIG, OGC, they all have the capability of going in and seeing what's going on. Not to mention all the processes are documented and the training is uniform. So anybody can just go learn. Improved accountability and transparency. What's happened a lot in a lot of grant programs is maybe you have program staffs that do a lot of work. Maybe you have a grant staff that does some work, but there's gaps between all of the stakeholder groups involved in the process. And really what we've tried to do is I think of those as kind of studs behind the wall, but without the actual wall board on it. And what we've tried to do is we'll put the wall board on there so it's complete from one end to the next. And you got to work with me on that analogy. I just worked that one for the first time. So, sir.
That transparency doesn't go as far as cross-accessing, in other words, agencies being able to access other.
Yeah, so exactly. So each agency has the security allows for us to cordon off just to see your information. But even at the agency level, you can decide, let's say you've got 27 programs, you can decide if an individual should have access to one or all 27 programs. And you can decide whether that's read-only access to all 27 and operational access to one or any combination thereof. There's tremendous flexibility with that. And of course, the transparency also goes to FATA Act reporting, and then here in the near future, Data Act. So for FATA Act, for example, we actually use the SAM records. USDA has all SAM records in its financial system. It's updated every single day. So when a recipient, for example, goes in and creates an application non-competitively, or even through grants.gov, once we've received that application package, we have a validation system so we know who it is that we're working with. Their identities, their user roles are tied to their organizational structure through our level 2 e-authentication credentialing system. So we know who it is that's in our system, when they're in, what they're doing, and we know that we can hold the recipient organization accountable for anyone's actions inside the system. Program compliance. Again, this is one of the areas where I get into the monitoring piece, because I think that's where the biggest monitoring piece should be, is on program compliance. And so because the system is robust enough, most information that programs need to collect is data. Well, PEGA is robust enough for us to simply be able to collect that data and then tie it to the financial data and to the agreement-related data. Increased efficiency and lower complexity. Increased efficiency is an example for Foreign Agricultural Service. When they used to reimburse organizations, they had 17 human touches for SF-270, a request for payments. 17 human touches. And it included 2 rubber stamps in the process. So a very antiquated approach. And right now, if, let's say, the University of Missouri goes in there and puts in a request for payment, there's actually only 1 human touch on the USDA side on the Happy Path. So, so let's go ahead. Oh, I'm doing this. How about that? All right. So comprehensive. So again, biggest part of this, comprehensive financial management or management integration. I like to think of grants at the 30,000 foot level as being half financial and then half program or activity based. And so our financial management integration actually allows us real-time financials that are 100% accurate 100% of the time. And I think I have to put an asterisk on that and say 99.9 just in case something happens sometime. We've talked a little bit about the reporting data, but I'll just say more broadly from USA Spending is to say that if it's data that's collected, then we have that as part of our reporting. We use BI reporting. Again, we're just now moving into the cloud, and so it gives us a robust set of tools to be able to manage and utilize data for our own benefit. We've talked about SAM and CCR registration. Because we have that actual information, as you can imagine, we automatically populate all the fields for applications and amendments and SF-270s and so forth, because we have most of the information that's in the process. In fact, when we do the SF-425, which is a federal financial report, we actually already know all the information. We just let them tell us what they think it is, and we have an approval workflow to tell them that they're either too wrong or they're right. So internal control so secure environment. USDA takes security extremely serious. FBI has the New Orleans, which is the National Finance Center part of USDA, is the #4 domestic target for cyber crimes. So USDA takes security extremely serious. We have a number of firewalls to help us protect, and again, we require all of our users to have level 2 e-authentication. And one of the ways that we're making that more user-friendly is we're in the process of having an online process for getting elevated to a level 2 e-authentication, so you don't have to drive somewhere and show your ID. All right, let me move on. Okay, so some of the effective, part of our internal controls effort is to ensure separation of duties, making sure that functions are being tied to actual business rules. And by business rules, we mean rules, either something that is statutorily or regulatorily required, or that is a best business practice. Checks and balances across lifecycle functionality. So I like to say, give the example, I went to an agency, they said, well, we have online SF-270 payment requests built into our system. So I said, well, how does that work? They said, well, our recipient enters the information online, we download that information, we put it into our program system, and then we take that information and then we tie it to our general ledger. And I said, well, that sounds really good, but that's the basic concept. But really what we're doing, to give you the example on the payments, is we're making sure we're doing business with the person who purports to be sending in that request. They're using the proper forms. They're going through multiple levels of security, that when they put in that request for payment, there's validations to ensure that the money is coming from the right pools of money, tied to the right agreement record, which is tied to the reporting capability, which is tied to the amendment process, which is tied to the closeout process. Throughout that entire life cycle, anywhere where money has to deal with it, there's validations going across that life cycle. So it's extremely robust. Organizational structure separation, so for FSA or for FEMA or for whomever is out there, for when they come in, we certainly segregate that information so that others can't peek into it. All right, so we have a number of ways to inform all parties. Notifications, again, extremely robust. HANA reporting, displays, dashboards, then work items. And work items are simply a notification that requires an action by a designated user. Now, one of the nice things about those work items, I think, is if you were to go into many systems and there's defined user roles, we don't have defined user roles per se. You can actually, if we have an agency grants management officer role and we have a program manager user role, as a customer, you can actually go in and define what functions those user roles do within the system. All of that is configurable, which simply makes sense because if you're in the grant world, no two grant people, I think, do the same job, particularly across programs and across agencies. If you were to go look at the 1109 job series from OPM, it's everything under the sun, from budget to finance to program to grant administration and so forth. And so this gives the agencies the opportunity, instead of customizing user roles, to actually use the functionality and just through configuration. Okay, so money is, well, it's important to me, and maybe because I don't have so much of it being in the government sector, but what we want to do is make sure that our pennies add up. And so the one way to do that is to help ensure that we have one source of the financial truth. And the way to do that is go to the source of the information, and that's the general ledger, the system of record. So effectively, what many agencies actually have with their grant solutions is they have a tool. This is, in fact, USDA's official record for our A123 compliant record, because the data we are using is in fact our financial data. So that goes from creating what we call a commitment at the agreement level, we call it a funds pre-commitment, to a commitment, to obligating or de-obligating funds on an amendment, to making the payments, to de-obligating any funds at the end of the award as part of the closeout process.
Question on that. So is that all in the SAP backend, or does the Pega database store any of the system records?
Yeah, so what we've done is we use Pega for some functions in the life cycle, but not for the entire life cycle. And then we have the external user, so our applicant recipient. So we've gone through there and effectively we filter through what information we want shared. So much of that information is shared. So if you think about the claims process, and while the approval workflows and the forms are taking place for the external user inside of Pega, the actual financial transactions actually taking place in SAP's ECC. And then that information is delivered back, of course, in real time to Pega to be shared with the external user, right? So that way they can see the status of their claim payment. They can see what their current balances are, whether at the aggregate or at the cost element level. We are external portal, are mobile enabled. This is one of the areas that I'm most excited about. So while I think we've got the financial piece knocked out of the park, I think that the mobile piece is really going to be beneficial on our program side. So this allows us the opportunity to go out and do site visits, to be able to collect the information on an application or using an app, and then once that information is submitted back, it effectively becomes near real-time information with our financial information. So, and then we've talked a bit about the cloud computing and the reporting. So, I'm going to just talk this real quick. This is really about as we've really gone out there and we've looked at all the rules that we can find that are government-wide, USDA-wide, and put them into the system.
Wait, can you go back one?
Sure.
Okay. I was looking at your do not pay list. So is that for people who don't do deliverables, or what is that?
Yeah, so if effectively you're a bad player, or maybe you're just dead, then we're not supposed to pay you. So this is a government-wide, the Do Not Pay is government-wide initiative to help ensure that we're not paying those who aren't supposed to be paid. And so this is part of the process through the system that allows us to help ensure we're not paying the right players or pay the wrong players.
Okay. Following that.
Yes.
Purely out of curiosity, how do you get notified that someone is dead?
That's actually from the Social Security death records.
Is that behind the scenes getting, or is that someone actually taking those records and figuring out if...
Yeah, so this is actually on the Treasury side,
Okay.
is part of their ASAP ability. So they're running through a host of, I forgot how many it is, 7 or 12 or whatever the number is, of databases to find those who aren't supposed to be getting paid. So we've talked about security. I want to make sure we have time to get through our demo. Future functionality, so currently we use just the in-house document management tools. We hope to expand on that a bit. We are looking to bring in part of the next release, one of our next releases this coming year is to do repayments. Many organizations, when they do a repayment, that is money's owed back to the government tied to that agreement record, they go in and they do an adjustment to the financial record, to the general ledger. And what we really want to do is make the adjustment to the agreement record, which is then reflected in the general ledger. Because we really want our agreement record to encapsulate all of the activities associated with the transaction. And you've heard me use the word grant, and I think I said a cooperative agreement earlier. We're not just grants in our system that was called EZ-Fed grants, but currently we have 4 different transaction types in there. So grants, cooperative agreement, joint venture agreements, and cost reimbursable agreements. And these are cost reimbursables that aren't subject to the FAR. But we are Soon to have collection agreements where we're performing on behalf of non-federal entities. MOUs, Memorandum of Understandings, or Memorandums of Agreement where there are non-funded or non-binding transactions, and a whole host of others. I think we have about 31 or 32 transactions that are in the queue, including a variety of partnership authorities where we have money coming in and out simultaneously, loans, and so forth. So we're looking at a very robust system in terms of transaction types. So this is Dr. Smith, by the way. So you have any questions right now? Yes?
Did you work directly with SAP and Pega to build this out, or do you have a third-party systems integrator?
So we have a third party. Accenture is the one that's helping us with this project, but we are working closer and closer with Pega as well. All right, so let's go ahead and, oh, I'm sorry, you had a question, sir?
There's a wide story that's getting a lot of traction now in the news about some California National Guards being paid bonuses. You may have heard of it, but they should have been paid, or the level, I guess the amount was in excess. Now the government wants that money, the excessive money, back with interest. Have you heard this story?
I'm not familiar with the story, but it's not an uncommon story.
Yeah. How would something like this possibly address that, to prevent, the government was in error to begin by paying the level of bonuses out to these soldiers.
Right.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I was a little disappointed to hear artificial intelligence several times today. We do not have artificial intelligence in the system. So there is no AI component, and that's probably a bit of a ways downstream for it. I'm going somewhere with this. You got to hang on with me. And so when we're doing business, we do know who we are doing business with. We know that there's been segregation of dues, so we know that they were properly awarded. We know that the award has been properly managed through the life cycle. But in terms of like unallowable cost type item, right now we haven't incorporated technology to really look at that. But I know that one of my interests is to go more into using the proactive analytics so that we can start to identify trends, so we can find fraud, waste, and abuse, and we can start targeting those types of things. We're not there yet. That's a dream of mine, and I think that's where our answer will rest in the future. Yes, sir.
So as part of standardization across agencies, are you also mandating them to use treasury payment systems so that it becomes a holistic solution, or they are using their different satellite systems, what they have been using in their?
Yeah, so far, as I mentioned, everybody that's come into the solution so far has been on a voluntary basis. And I've heard a lot of people say, my program's unique, we can't get away from a major payment system that's out there run by another agency. And when they sit down and they start to really think about what their wants and their needs are, all of a sudden many things that were once needs are actually just wants. And then when they get to see the bill that's associated with that want versus their need already being met, most organizations have come over to let's see how we're going to be able to utilize the enterprise-wide solution. Now I want to be cautious about saying that because that doesn't mean there's one way of doing it. It simply means that at a minimum the architecture is there so that there can be some variations on how organizations do it. Okay? It's not it's just to be clear, because a lot of times a lot of organizations go and they look at a solution and it's either it fits or it doesn't fit. And if it doesn't fit, deal with it. And we're not trying to say that at all. We're saying we want it to meet your needs, but we also want you to think about what your real needs are. Sir?
Back to the Accenture, what they're working. Are they leveraging open APIs between the two platforms? Or there custom code they're building between?
I'm sorry, did you just ask a question?
How are SAP and Pega talking to each other?
Okay.
Is it a custom code?
Yeah, I will answer that question after this meeting as soon as I find someone that can actually answer that. Yes, ma'am.
When you were talking about cost reimbursement and MOUs and MOAs, how is that different from procurement or from just like regular procurement?
Yeah, so I know some organizations have, in the grant world, federal grant sector, have gone to procurement tools to manage electronically their grant portfolios. And so, and that may be a good fit for them. If you ask me, I'm a grant person, there's nothing that we do in the grant world that we couldn't procure, if you ask me. And there's nothing that we procure that theoretically we couldn't grant. The void between the extremes is pretty broad. A little legislative change, and then my statement certainly could become true. So a lot of it just becomes to what are the opportunities out there, and then what's the best fit for that organization. MOUs I'll accept simply because they're non-binding, so they're not subject to the FAR. But the process is the same. That's why we've introduced them. Collection agreements. This is us collecting money, right? Well, guess what they have? They have a pre-award, an award, come on, this is where y'all join in, post-award, and a closeout process. All of them do. And by the way, there's oftentimes an affiliation with an MOU and with a grant transaction, or with an interagency agreement and a grant transaction. So, and this is a great way for us to be able to tie that data together, tie those transaction types together, but they all share a common set of processes. Now, it may be that your interagency agreements require 37 approvals in the workflow, but your MOU requires 2. That's just configuration. And we can do that. That's a hour session, in the onboarding process. It's de minimis. So, but in terms of having workflows and all those phases, it's all the same. And that's where we get into the reusability piece. Sir?
Chris, I apologize if you already said this. You mentioned it's a shared service. Is that just within USDA and its agencies, operating divisions, or is that beyond USDA as well?
I've been told I can't say it's global, so I won't. But it is, we are a shared service provider, a financial shared service provider. This is part of our financial shared service provider portfolio. And so yes, it is available to external, to non-USDA customers. Yep. All right, with that then we'll go ahead and jump into. So what Kristen is doing, can you go back? I'm sorry. What she's doing is she's actually gone to Google and she typed in Easy Fed Grants, and it's taken her to through a link to this web page. What you're seeing right here is the USDA e-authentication. This is part of our security protocol to enter. It's a credentialing system. Again, all users have to have what we call level 2. There is a level 1, which anybody can get. Chinese spies, they can get it. You just go online and you get it. It's pretty easy. That's what intro spies do. But if you want to get level 2, this is where we have a validation process, credentialing process to help ensure you are who you purport to be. And so she has a user role. You can see that it has a link past a PIV. Then it has a username password on the right side. So from the USDA side, we use the PIV cards. For our external customers, let's say University of Missouri, they simply use a username and password. There's a tremendous effort for PIV cards for 100,000 external users. Now, what we allow our external users to do, by the way, is when they come into the solution, they have the ability to manage their own permission. So we actually grant permission to their first user for a particular role, and then they manage all their organization's users because they're in the best position to know who works for them and so forth. We just know who they are as an individual. So here's a partial screenshot of what it looks like. We've got what I call the dashboard, the 5 tiles above. Depending on user role, depends on what the user functionality is that they have access to. But here we have notifications, actionable items, applications, amendments, and then claims under review. So she can dig into those and look at some underlying information. News and notes is simply a way for us to provide information to internal users or external or both. And then more importantly for our discussion here is my agreement. So she has an external user role. She can click on that, it's going to expand, and she can now look at her entire agreement portfolio. Now, when I say entire agreement portfolio, if 47 agencies are in here and you're the University of Missouri and you do work with 43 of them, you will see your entire agreement portfolio for all 43 agencies. So many organizations very much like this. Eastern Kentucky said they have 47, 49 different grant systems that they have to go into. And so this is a way for us to provide a single experience for them. Yes?
So when they first register, are they able to check multiple agencies that they work with, or how?
No, they go in there, they're only going to see agreements that they are associated with. They can only see their agreement portfolio. So if they're not doing business with HUD and HUD's in here, they're not going to see anything from HUD because HUD's not in there. But they could find HUD opportunities if they were non-competitive.
But if they were doing business with HUD, then when they first register on Pega, they are able to select multiple agencies that they work with. So that
Actually, what they'll do is they'll select one so that they can get approval. Once they're in, now they're enterprise. Same thing with reviewers for application review process. So here's my agreements. If you go to the right-hand column, it's got some of the vitals, the FANE, and some other information. But more importantly to the customer is the actions drop down. This is where they can go down there depending on the program, depending on the agency. It will allow them to take certain activities. So in this case, they can view their agreement details for that transaction, view their amendments, view the award document, claims, create a claim, and view reports. And as we get repayment functionality, you'll see that there as well as some additional functionality. So she could simply click on View Agreement Details. This will take her to a section that has an overview of that transaction. These are what I'll just call some of the vitals, the project title, period of performance, the status you can see as executed. Go down to the budget overview. This simply shows the total award amount, dispersed amount, and the remaining balance. And then the claims overview, we can see that there is a claim that's in progress. The status is over there. She can certainly click into that claim ID and delve down and actually look at the SF-270 form that's being prepared. Amendment overview. This shows any of the amendments that are in progress. And in this case, you can see there's Amendment 01 that's pending budget execution. So they know what the status is for that amendment request. Detailed budget. This is an overview of the approved award budget. So they can get a quick glimpse of what that looks like. Now, of course, if they were to go in and put in a payment request, they could actually see what the balances are all the way down to the line level. So, for example, their salaries, they could see there was $50,000 for salaries. They've already we've dispersed $30,000, and there's $20,000 left for them to make a claim against. So when they make a claim, they'll know what the ceiling is for that particular line. And then a partner section, and this is simply those individuals at the agency and at the recipient level who are active participants on that agreement. Could be a PD or a PI, could be the Office of Sponsored Agreements folks, as well as the agency grants, finance, budget, and so forth. All right, so where are we going now? So we're looking at another agreement tier. We're going to view the amendment. And we have very robust search capabilities in Pega that allow us to identify something specific if we want to. Here she can go down and view the amendment document if she wants to see what that's about. And then open it up. And then, of course, agencies have various customized forms to give their own flavor. Some share the same type of form, same format. So let's go on to the next. All right. This is just a copy of the notice of award. So this was generated out of the system. All of our award documents are customized to the particular program, recipient type, activity. The list goes on down. And for example, here's the budget. This budget is actually the budget that's inside of Pega, which is inside of CRM, which reflects the actual lines of accounting that are hitting against the general ledger. So with that, I think I've got 37 seconds maybe. Does anyone have any questions?
Where do you finally archive all of this information?
So right now the information is archived, or right now we haven't archived anything. We've been in production since July of 2013, and so we're not to the ceiling for archiving. But we are in the process of having ensuring that when we have our a more robust document management tool behind this, that we're compliant with NARA. Mm-hmm. Yes, sir.
So you are using the same URL for internal and external users, right?
No. Internal or external users go, Google EasyFed grants. Internal users actually go through our enterprise financial solution. Yep. And so when they get there, it's called FIMI. When they get there, they've got all kinds of functionality there. One of those is grants management. They click on that tab, and then they have the ability to go to the internal portal or to the external portal. So for security reasons, we've separated the external users from internal users.
And you said that you have the deep card authentication?
Yes.
So have you used the single sign-on feature here or single sign-on?
That's the part in the RER process of USDA is what that is.
Yeah, it is configured for single sign-on.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yes, sir.
508 compliant for the external side?
Yes.
Box, or-
Yeah. Well, there's always a caveat on what 508 compliant is and isn't. So I can say yes with an asterisk.
Okay.
Yeah, but that's something, it's a huge deal in USDA to ensure that we're 508 compliant. Yes, sir.
What kind of training is needed for external users?
So external training, we've got documentation that's available to them as well as training modules. But currently we've got enterprise training material, but we allow the agencies to train their external users however they want to do that. And so the way, for example, Foreign Agricultural Service does is every month or every 2 months, something like this, they have sessions where they have organizations come in and participate in those trainings. Then they have a help desk that then provides hand-holding through the process as people go through the learning cycle. Yes?
You talked a little bit about the grant application process in terms of, I don't know, USDA grants, how much changes there are from year to year to set up the application, the configuration, so to speak, of the business rules or the application form that the applicants fill out. How much workload is in that, and does this solution help streamline that process?
Yeah, so I can only say we have one real example of that, and that is really the introduction into research-related applications into our process. We haven't had any fundamental changes to the other piece, other than some small tweaks here and there. But we effectively used a new layer inside of Pega for applications. As we have those new transaction types coming online, we'll continue to do that to use wherever appropriate. Now, I will tell you, I've told you we have 4 transaction types currently in the system. We actually use the SF424 for all of those. So we've actually created the process to be the same. Mm-hmm. All right, thank you very much. I know I'm over time, so appreciate you joining.